Welcome. You're listening to Ask the Doulas, a podcast where we talk to experts from all over the country about topics related to pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and early parenting. Let's chat.
Hello, this is Kristin Revere with Ask the Doulas, and I am thrilled to chat with Jennifer Campbell today. Jennifer is the owner and founder of Doula in Reno, and she's also the host of Becoming Parents podcast. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So excited to chat about the important topic of family planning and the adoption journey, especially your own personal journey as a mother. So would love to begin with a bit of your background. And if you don't mind sharing some of your adoption stories with our listeners, that would be fantastic.
I love it. You know, it's interesting how you look back at your life at things that were super pivotal that you didn't realize were super pivotal at the time. I grew up in a family that there was lots of dysfunction, and my third grade teacher made a monumental difference in my life, just completely changed my trajectory. She was probably the single biggest influence. And although I did realize it as a little third grader, that she made me feel special and smart and important, things in our household got considerably worse after I was in third grade. But to her, I was worth it. And I knew that. And that was a lesson that really has lived in me my entire life. I was actually able 24 years ago, I'm 53 now, and that was third grade. So 24 years ago, I lived in Alaska and I flew back to Rhode Island. I found her and I said, you know, I talk about you in all my talks and what a difference that you made. And really the only person that needs to know is you. And I spent a weekend with her. And that was really, I'm very grateful for that. That was one of those moments, one of those things that makes a significant difference later. Another thing is that it was right before my 16th birthday. I hadn't started my period yet. My mom was concerned about that, and she brought me to an OBGYN. I'm a virgin. Nobody's even felt my boobs. And this doctor did an exam on me. It was a really overwhelmingly positive experience with a male practitioner, which I think, you know, a lot of us don't have that, or we're concerned about that. And I feel really blessed that he was very kind and like just gentle in general in his demeanor, in his exam, because he gave me a vaginal exam. I had the speculum, the whole thing.
Okay.
And that's very uncomfortable for an almost 16-year-old virgin.
Sure.
And he said to me, I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but I want you to be aware that it may be really difficult for you to have children. Don't be surprised if you end up going through infertility. Fascinating now that I'm almost 54, thinking, what in the world did he see at that appointment of like I was turning 16 within a couple months and just hadn't started my period? Like, what was it that made him say that to me? And I honestly, at the time, I was like, whatever, like, who cares?
Sure.
However, later on, and he was also the same doctor, like when I started my period a couple months later, I was in the hospital. I was in the hospital for cyst rupturing. I was in the hospital because my bleeding was so heavy. And then I'd be amenorrheic, so I wouldn't have a cycle for several months. And then when I got one, it was just absolutely debilitating. So he put me on birth control pills because that's what you do, right? I was on birth control pills. And I went off of them 5 years later when I got married, and we decided we didn't want to use birth control. And a year after that, I had had no period, no pregnancy, no miscarriage, nothing. Nothing had happened in my body for a year. So automatically put me in the infertility category. I went to an infertility specialist and I did 10 months. I was maxed out on Clomid, maxed out on Provera. So they had to induce my cycle with progesterone, with Provera.
Okay.
And then they induced ovulation, or attempted to, with Clomid. And I did 7-day surgery. So, you know, they flush your fallopian tubes. They take biopsies from your cervix. It's really hard. I was doing basal body temperature and having sex every other day. And, you know, in this crusade to become pregnant. And granted, I was 20 years old at the time. I was young, really young.
Right. So young.
The interesting things, I ended up after 10 months, he's like, we've done all the surgeries to figure out what's wrong. We can't figure it out. You've been maxed out on medication. Next up is IVF. And I said, I appreciate that. And I'm waving the white flag. That's not my journey. I feel also grateful that I knew at 20 years old, like, nope, I am not doing that. I have so much mad respect for women who end up continuing on with IUI or IVF, but it was absolutely not my path. And so he was weaning me off the medication and doing blood work. He was this little Asian guy. I'm 5'9", 5'8", 5'9". He was like probably 5'4", little Asian, very soft spoken. And he walked into the exam room one day and he hugged me. And after 10 months of working with this man, I was like, what is going on? And he said, I don't know how it happened, and it was off of our cycle, but you are pregnant. Must have randomly thrown out an egg and caught it at the right time. And
amazing.
Yep. He said, this is a miracle. It's your gift from God. I don't know that you'll ever be able to get pregnant again. Expect that if you get pregnant, you have a higher rate of miscarriage, and also that you may have a rough pregnancy because just my hormone levels in general and how much they change during pregnancy. He was correct. Again, it's one of those like those little drops into your life where I did end up getting pregnant 7 times total. I lost 3, 4 babies and 3 pregnancies. My final pregnancy, I lost twins at 16 weeks and ended up having a hysterectomy. So my biological journey was pretty tough. And the 4 pregnancies, the 4 babies I gave birth to, I had really rough pregnancies. It was easier for me though, because I had it in my head, right? You might go through infertility. You might have a hard time getting pregnant. Just be aware of that at 15. And then he said, realize that you may have a higher rate of miscarriage. And so I feel grateful because I heard those things, even though they didn't impact me in the moment. And they definitely made a big impact later. So I got pregnant. I had my daughter. My pregnancies were pretty tough. And she was born, that's a totally different story in itself. But she was born with a lung disease. They told me she wouldn't live through her first 3 days. And I would hold her for the first time after she had died. And that was a really tough situation to be in. My husband at the time, my ex-husband now, was military, so he wasn't there. I was 21. I didn't know anything about birth.
So tough.
Yeah. And I was supposed to be with a midwife at a birth center who looked at me at 37 weeks when I was in early labor and I had been on bed rest for a week. And she said, something's just not right. You can choose this hospital. So I went from natural birth center midwife to Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center in New Hampshire, which is a teaching facility. It's massive. And again, I just felt really blessed and grateful for that journey. And I wasn't leaving the hospital because if I'm going to hold my daughter for the first time after she died, I'm not going to the Ronald McDonald House. So a nurse found me on day 3, brought me to the nurse's station, let me shower, sat me down with lactation consultant. And I've been pumping, but I'd never seen a pump in my life. And the lactation consultant sized me and hooked me up and showed me how to work things and put her hand on my leg and said, tell me about your birth story, which I then sobbed.
Beautiful.
Right? Sobbed for 20 minutes. But that was why I went into birth work. And that experience is also why I decided my 3rd grade teacher made a really big difference to me. And I was a kid that should have been in foster care. And I don't care if I can get pregnant after this. I really, really want to do foster care. And that's how my adoption journey started. It was all of that. It was my teacher. It was you may go through infertility. You may have a high risk of miscarriage. I was like, I'm really grateful. She's 32 now. Spoiler alert. She's fine. She's great. But it was a really positive and yet very traumatic experience, basically from start to finish, that 1, got me into birth work, and 2, I was blessed that I was put on the foster care journey. So we became foster parent, and I adopted 6 children total. 3 of them were at birth, which is really unusual.
It is.
I think I got comments. Almost all my kids are adults now. I have 1 14-year-old and there's an 8-year gap. So all of 17 of 18 kids are all adults now. We have 18 children total.
I love it.
Fun and crazy. And for those just curious, it's 4 biological, 6 adopted, 2 that were long-term foster care, a foreign exchange student, and 5 stepkids. That's the breakdown. My journey with foster care, I just really wanted to make a difference the way someone had made a difference to me. And I very naively thought that would, 1, be easy, because don't we all think, like, I'm going to be a parent, this is going to be great. I'm not going to make any of my parents' mistakes, and I'm going to do a great job, and my kids are going to love me for it. It doesn't exactly go that way, but I adopted 3 babies as infants, and I had people who wanted to adopt say, I've been on a waiting list for 2 years to adopt an infant. Well, I'm not looking for a Caucasian infant coming from a drug and alcohol-free mother with no genetic issues. And if you're looking for that, you're going to be on a waiting list for a while. I was
Yes.
not. My first son, I got called right after he was born, within a few hours. We picked him up at day 3. I was breastfeeding I had a 1-year-old daughter at that point that I was breastfeeding. So I just latched him on, kept going. By then I was a breastfeeding counselor, a lactation consultant. I was in birth work. So I just picked him up from the hospital and latched him on and let my milk supply build. And there you go. He breastfed for over a year and a half. With the other 2 adoptions, they were the last of the kids that were adopted. I was not breastfeeding anymore. So I was an IBCLC though. And so I had a lot of resources and I just knew you could do it. I think, again, like blind naivety is just a beautiful thing because you just are like, yeah, let's do this. It should work fine because you don't know any different. I relactated. Those 2 were born 8 months apart. And so I relactated. I took Diane 35 as a birth control pill that you take and you skip the sugar pills. So I went on the Newman protocol, Jack Newman's protocol. And I took that. I didn't take it. I didn't have a long time to take that. Generally, you would do that throughout an entire pregnancy or through the majority of a pregnancy. I think I only did that for 6 or 8 weeks that I took Diane 35. So it was a shortened time span, but you're tricking your body into a constant state of pregnancy. And then I took domperidone so that the Diane 35 stopped, the baby's born, and you start domperidone, which is a galactagogue. It's for reflux. Infants can take it. So Reglan is one that got some pros and cons to it. Domperidone is more widely used, or was. Again, that daughter and son are 23 and 22, turning 23 and 22. So this was a little while ago, but I took that. I did the domperidone. I pumped. I had a pumping cycle. And then when she was born, I latched her on. I didn't ever get a full milk supply. And I think probably that was because the time that I had prepped my body and do that was short. And I also, during that pregnancy of my first daughter, I had breast augmentation. So right. So my time was limited. Well, I had the breast augmentation and I had limited time to be on Diane 35. Breast augmentation should not affect that, especially because I had my boobs put back to where they were. I had them lifted and I had implants put in. So I wasn't having any tissue removed. And in those situations, generally, it's not that big of an issue. But it wasn't that I had augmentation. It was just having a surgery on my breast area in general, and then throwing myself into relactation in a short period of time after that, and having the relactation protocol be condensed. I think all of those things. Sure. I just didn't have a full milk supply. So I used an SNS, a supplemental nursing system. I got real familiar with lots of them. I'm like, oh, there's 7 of them. Let's get them all and try them. And this was in the days.
And as a doula and IBCLC, you personally had so many different experiences in your feeding journey to be able to share with clients and research even further. So I think that's fascinating.
It was great to be able to go through it. A lot of the times we know things in working theory, but we haven't actually had the ability to experience them. So in my biological and adoption journey, I'm glad I've had a lot of personal experience, as well as just having the book smart too. So I went through the protocol. I used an SNS. 8 months later, my son was born. So again, I didn't go through the protocol again. I was nursing, so I just latched him on. And I found someone, at that point, who was donating a lot of frozen milk. And she gave me that milk. We did an exchange. I lived in Alaska, like I said. She lived in Seattle, Washington. And I flew her up and she spent a weekend with her 18-month-old son. And I did all kinds of touristy stuff with her. And she forgot her cooler with all the breast milk in it at my house.
Oh, no.
So she was supposed to. You can't pay for breast milk. So I didn't. I just paid for her trip and she forgot it. That's kind of how we did it.
I got it. Okay.
23, almost 22 plus years ago. So I had enough breast milk that I got my daughter through to her first year and my son through a year. So I supplemented whatever I was making with the supply that I got from this gorgeous woman in Seattle who had a surplus. And I just like with breastfeeding, like with a lot of things, you get a system. And I had a really great system of knowing how long I was going to be gone and if I could breastfeed without a supplementer, or if I needed to bring it, and how you bring it with you in the diaper bag and thaw it out and that sort of thing. In the bottle, you wear a bottle around your neck, basically, with breast milk.
Right.
And then it's a little tube that you tape to your breast so that the baby latch on to the nipple and the tube. And then you can control the flow of that tube. And so a lot of the times I would just have it hanging around my neck, kind of in between my breasts, warming up while we were driving into town. And then, so it would hit body temperature.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, you just get a good system. I do remember one time standing in the kitchen with my son. He was probably like 9 or 10 months old, and I had the supplementer hooked up and I was holding him. He was in the sling and I had him latched on, and it wasn't screwed on correctly or all the way. And the supplementer popped open and breast milk flooded both of us.
Oh, and you're like, liquid gold. Oh no.
It's liquid gold. But I remember looking over at my husband and being like, I'm so done.
Yes.
And I wasn't. I got him a couple more months. It's this beautiful fairy tale thing, and it sounds all great and easy, and I had a good system. It's also work, and it's hard. And I was willing to put my body on medications to relactate because breastfeeding was more important to me than being on a birth control pill on domperidone. And I think we all have to balance that out. Can women do that even if they have never breastfed a baby? Absolutely. Are they going to get a full milk supply? I don't know. But they can still breastfeed and have the bonding. And if that is important to you, even with a partial milk supply and a supplemental nursing system, then you just do it. You do it and it's worth it. But I think we all have to make that decision, because putting yourself on a birth control pill for a certain amount of time and putting yourself on a pumping schedule and then taking a galactose, taking domperidone and breastfeeding this baby and using a supplementer, and that whole process, I got really great at it. I mean, I did it for like more than a year and a half plus. And it's not easy. It was absolutely worth it. The benefits to me were so far better, more than the fact that I had to take some medication and stuff and pump, and that it was an inconvenience for me. But definitely, I don't want to paint it as like the prettiest picture ever. It's a lot of work, and it was challenging. And there were times where like that, I remember very vividly that moment being like, my husband laughing because I got dumped with breast milk and just being like, this is so frustrating right now. So, I adopted kids at 2 and 5 and 9 or 10 and 12, and it's all different. Obviously, every situation is different. But for me, that whole more natural lifestyle, and I could not change these 3 babies that I breastfed. I could not make the pregnancy better. I could not make their genetic issues better. I couldn't take away the fact that they were drug exposed or 6 weeks premature. I couldn't remove any of the things that kind of inherently come with adopting foster kids. But what I could do is give them all the nurturing, the love, the bonding, the breastfeeding that I gave all of my biological kids. And that meant a lot to me. I was really blessed. I was in a foster adoption program. So it's another question that comes up, like, how were you able to breastfeed foster kids? I was in a foster adoption program, and I had a really the head of the department was really fascinating. When I adopted my son, I just said, look, I know it's going to take 6 months for this adoption and things can always fall through, but I really want to breastfeed him. And she said, if you don't ask, I don't have to say no. And I was like, you are fabulous. Okay. Sin now, repent later, ask forgiveness, not permission, like whatever that was. So again, I'm not encouraging people to go against county law or suggestion, but I was in a really unique situation in a unique location, and I had really supportive people around me. So for the next 2 babies, I just didn't ask. I didn't say a word, and I just breastfed them, knowing that if something had fallen through, that would have taken a toll on my body to some degree, because I would have had a milk supply that had to go away. And again, it's just like, you have to look at this from all facets and decide, is it worth the worst case scenario? Is it worth the side effects? Is it worth the hassle? And for me, it was. And it's not going to be that way for everyone, but I feel really blessed that I was able to breastfeed 7 kids, 3 of which did not come from my body, for 11 years in total. And it was a really amazing part of my journey. And the adoptions as well, just looking at kids who came from places that weren't ideal and trying to make that better for them.
So beautiful. And what a sacrifice to relactate and give them as much nourishment and also immunity as possible in those early stages.
Hey, Alyssa here. I'm just popping in to tell you about our course called Becoming. Becoming a Mother is your guide to a confident pregnancy and birth, all in a convenient 6-week online program. From birth plans to sleep training and everything in between, you'll gain the confidence and skills you need for a smooth transition to motherhood. Live coaching calls with me and Kristin, tons of expert videos including chiropractic care, pelvic floor physical therapy, mental health experts, breastfeeding, and so much more. You'll also get a private Facebook community with other mothers going through this at the same time as you to offer support and encouragement when you need it most. If you'd like to learn more about the course, you can email us at info@goldcoastdoulas.com or check it out at thebecomingcourse.com. We would love to see you there. We also have a book called Supported, Your Guide to Birth and Baby, which makes a beautiful companion to this course. It's a great book for any expecting mother and is the perfect baby shower gift. You can find information on that book at supportedbook.com.
Yeah, and I think one of them was 6 weeks premature. One of them was genetically predisposed to Huntington's disease, and the other one was drug positive. And definitely drug positive, you see what's happening more than in the others where they're kind of in the background. And I was trained to use an NG tube on those last 2 babies. I was doing gram scale weight with them every other day, so I could take them home from the hospital just because I had a little extra training. And watching a child go through pretty severe drug withdrawals for 6 to 8 weeks, just constantly shaking, not being able to manage her body temperature. So she was she had to be on a heating pad or kangarooed. And that child has been kangarooed by all of her siblings. There's not a more kangarooed child, right? But we watched her over, it was about an 8-week process till it was done. Her withdrawals were completely over. I remember like at that 5 to 6 week mark when babies start to smile, she would be shaking and looking up at me smiling. And I'm like, holy cow, this, right? Just, it was really a blessing. And she got we couldn't have given her a better start in her life for what she had gone through in utero through that pregnancy. And so I also feel really grateful I got to directly see the results of what I was doing and how much of a difference that it can make in their lives.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing your stories. So beautiful, Jen. I would be curious, though, with such a large family, how you manage the on-call life of a birth doula, in addition to being an IBCLC lactation consultant.
The first 12 years happened, like I said, right after my first daughter was born. By the time she was a year old, so 31 years ago, I was a breastfeeding counselor. I was running the Leche League meetings. And in that 12 years, the last 7, I was actually an assistant to the midwives that I used. My next 3 births were home births in Alaska. And so I've gotten to experience the hospital and had a positive but tough labor and delivery there, outside of my daughter being born with a lung disease. I mean, just my experience in labor and delivery in the hospital. And then I had 3 home births. And so I apprenticed with them. I was planning at that point, 30 years ago, to go the midwife route, the home birth midwife, a lay midwife. And I was able to balance working clinic hours. Obviously, I could bring my baby, doing births, kind of with my own schedule. So I did that for 7 years, and I was an IBCLC for 5 of that 12 years. So I did different things. And I think one thing is I had a really good support network. And in Alaska, it's much more apparent when I was living there. The community raises a child. I had good friends in the community. There were 3 other moms, my sister and 2 other moms who all lived there. And we rotated babysitting for date nights and for doctor's appointment. And we also got together. We did a lot of cooking together. So everybody would bring something and make, like I would make chili times 4, keep 1 and give away the other 3, but they would all do the same thing. So I think Alaska's more designed communally because it's a tough place to live. And I had a really great support network. He may be my ex-husband, but for other reasons, but he was really supportive of me being a stay-at-home mom, doing foster care, and me continuing to fulfill what I wanted to do, even if it had to happen a little bit more slowly because we had a big family. One thing that we had that was so helpful was someone to clean our house once a week. So
I bet.
I just can't even tell you. That's something I really haven't had since then. When I moved from Alaska to Reno and we got divorced, I had to give up birth work. And it was the hardest 2 years of my adult life. My ex-husband wasn't around. He went to prison. So for 2 years, I went from doing birth work and living in Alaska and not having to stress as much about finances and to have this life that I really loved, to him going to prison and me having to work up to 4 jobs. I'd worked 2 jobs a lot, and I worked up to 4 sometimes. I had 8 kids at home at the time, and I had to give up birth work, and it was devastating. It was absolutely devastating. I gave away everything birth work related, and this was 20 years ago. I gave everything away, and it was a mistake. I wish I hadn't done that, but I felt like emotionally, it was just so hard to walk away from everything that I loved and that I was familiar with and good at, because it wouldn't give me a schedule and an income that I needed for my family. Because birth work is really, it's not consistent money and it's not consistent days and times.
Exactly.
So I gave it up. I remarried. We've been together 10 and a half years. And a few years ago, he said, "You're the happiest person that I know, but you don't do anything that fulfills you." And we had this really amazing, monumentally pivotal conversation. I looked at him at the end of our date night. We were at dinner and I was like, "You understand this is a Pandora's box. Once this is open, we can never come back from this." And he said, "I'll do everything I can to support you." And he's done everything. So part of that was me not working and not bringing in an income. And we had to make some adjustments for that. And then we had to spend money for me to get training. I did not pick up where I left off and go the midwifery route. I did look at that for the first couple of months, but ultimately, I'm in Nevada now. It's the state laws, it's the country laws, it's the politics of it, it's the climate kind of the environment you live in, it's the cost. And I kind of looked at all of it and was like, no, I'm not going to pick up where I left off and finish becoming a midwife. Basically, I'd have to start over again, but I'm going to go the doula route and be non-medical and less confrontational. And that was a very good decision. It was less time and money to get up and running, but it wasn't just that. It removes me from a lot of that political climate in this area. And
makes sense. Yes.
An apprenticeship is harder. I am a CLE, a lactation educator. So I got that back right away. And I am in a program to get my IBCLC again, because if you've done it once, why not make yourself miserable and do it a second time?
Get all those hours in. Right.
And I'm really grateful. I was the first doula in the state of Nevada to become a Medicaid provider. I'm the only doula in my county, in Washoe County, who's a TRICARE provider. So I work with low income and military. The only doula who works in a jail here, domestic violence and substance use disorders. So I think birth work has changed a lot. It was interesting being out of it for about 15 years and then getting back into it and kind of relearning, mapping out how it is now. And it's really changed so much. Some of it in good ways and some of it less, but I can take insurance now, which was something I couldn't do before. I can work with demographics. Now I'm working with the mothers whose babies I would have adopted in the past. And now we have programs set up to help them transition with their baby with drug use and give them that support, that's been really outstanding. And yeah, it's been wonderful. But I went this route. So I have 15 years experience with a break in the middle. And I love it. It's a gift. Being able to do what you love, and having to give that up was devastating, but coming back to it with more experience and time, that's been really amazing. And the climate's changed enough that I think it's better now than it was 20 years ago. It's easier. It's more, people have heard of it.
Right. We don't need to educate them what a doula is. Yes.
I mean, we still are in that phase, but much less so. And I get to choose which clients are the best fit. It's not just them choosing me, it's me choosing them. And so that's been amazing, but I'm really grateful that I've gotten to go back to it.
I love that your husband encouraged you to follow your passion. What
Yeah,
an inspiring story all around between motherhood and your career and the impact you're making on the world. So thank you for sharing with our listeners, Jen. I
thank
would love
you.
to hear if you have any final tips for our listeners who are in that preconception journey and looking at all of their options.
I would say realize that I think a lot of us come into birth work out of our own first experience that that's generally traumatic. And birth work isn't necessarily what's going to heal you from that. You kind of need to work through that on your own aside from birth work, but it also can help heal some of that, but not to come into it from a sense of, I was traumatized and I don't want anyone else to be traumatized. That's not the right space to be in to come into it. And also to realize that you need to treat it as a business. Another doula and I in the state of Nevada are just getting ready to launch Doula Business Blueprint, which helps doulas run a business. We both have over a decade of running our own businesses individually. I think she's got more time than I have. I have a decade. And some of the biggest questions that we get asked by doulas isn't about birth work. It's about actually, this is a business. It's not a hobby. So it's not a fun, cute thing that you do on the side just because you are adamant that no one else experiences the trauma you experience. It's a business that really goes a long way to helping people have the birth that they want, which is not the birth that you want necessarily. So I think just going into it with the right attitude, getting support and help in whatever way that is to get through your own birth traumas, it's really important to separate that out and then to learn what it means to run a business wherever you're located, because that's huge.
It is. And to know your options, whether it's in birth work, and part of that is running the business, or in planning your family, to understand that adoption is a great option to consider, in addition to fertility treatments and IVF and some of the journeys that you personally went on, to do your research and talk about things openly so other people are aware of all of the options in their career in the birth and baby space, and also in their own family planning.
I agree. I feel like when I was told that I might not be able to have kids, I was like, yeah, watch me.
Right,
Like, hook or
exactly.
crook, I'm going to figure this out. I want a family and that's important. And here I am 33 years after that conversation with 18 kids and a blended family. It's definitely does not look at all the way I thought it would on the front end, but to just kind of take each option as you can and know that it doesn't have to look the same for you as it does to anyone else.
Exactly. So how can our listeners find you?
DoulaInReno.com is my website. The contact form's there. The phone number is my cell number. You can text, email, whatever's the easiest basically for them. All my social media links are there. The podcast is there. I mean, basically it's everything you never wanted to know about me. It's all there on the website. And just from there, whatever's the easiest for them to reach out, then they have the link.
Perfect. And your Becoming Parents podcast is on all the players, so easy to find.
Yes. Thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Jen. It was wonderful to chat with you, and I hope to have you on in the future.
Thanks for listening to Ask the Doulas. For more information about Gold Coast Doulas, visit us on our website, goldcoastdoulas.com. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and give us a 5-star review. Thank you. Remember, these moments are golden.